Picture a dim room inside a village wat. Shafts of sunlight trace dust motes above low wooden shelves, and on those shelves lie stacks of brittle, brown palm leaves banded together with twine. The scent is a quiet mix of old lacquer, ink, and incense. Who wrote those lines? What knowledge do they hold? And how do these fragile objects keep a people's memory alive through centuries of change and challenge?
Welcome to Ancient Echoes, where we trace the living heritage of Cambodia. I'm your host, Sam Nong Bradley. Today, we're going to open those low, dust-dappled shelves and follow a long, quiet thread, from the making of a palm leaf manuscript to the hands that used it, and to the modern projects racing to save them.
In today's episode, we're exploring Khmer manuscript traditions, how temples and village libraries kept medicine, chants, law, and poetry safe on leaves and in memory. We'll walk through materials and craft, the social networks that sustained written culture, and the ethical choices facing preservation. The layers matter. These objects are both practical tools and living spiritual items.
First, a little history. Written culture in Khmer lands didn't appear overnight. From stone inscriptions to palm leaf codices, writing served different communities. Royal courts inscribed law and dedication. Monasteries preserved Buddhist commentaries and paritta, protective chants. Village practitioners kept herbal recipes and practical poems. The phrase palm leaf manuscript in Khmer contexts often signals a bundle of long, rectangular leaves inscribed with a stylus and darkened with soot-based ink or lacquer.
The content varied. There were kamatana manuals, meditative guides, parittas for protection, medical formularies describing herbs and applications, astrological almanacs, legal texts, and vernacular poetry. Manuscripts could be in Pali, Khmer, written in multiple historical scripts, or mixed registers. The research tells us that literacy was layered. Monks, specialist scribes, and some lay patrons engaged with texts in different ways. That's the heart of the matter, written and oral knowledge braided together.
Let's unpack how a palm leaf book is made. Imagine harvesting young talipot or palmyra leaves at a precise season, drying them slowly to avoid warping, then cutting and smoothing each leaf until it's a thin, durable page. A scribe marks lines with a sharp stylus, etching letters as tiny grooves. After inscription, soot or lacquer is rubbed into the grooves so the writing becomes visible. Finally, leaves are stacked with protective wooden boards and bound by twine through holes near one edge. A simple, elegant design that keeps pages in order while allowing the bundle to flex.
The craft required knowledge across domains, botanical know-how to choose the right leaf, carpentry for protective coverboards, calligraphic skill for clear letter forms, and an ethical frame for handling sacred texts. In the scholarly sense, production was also a social act. Lay patrons often commissioned copies or repairs, and itinerant scribes traveled between villages and wats to copy texts or teach reading.
That brings us to the living rooms of knowledge, monastic libraries and scriptoriums. Temples were not merely places of worship. They were educational centers, storage hubs, and nodes in a network. A single monastery might hold a dozen bundles. A village school used manuscripts as memory aids, and court libraries preserved higher-level scholarship. Text circulated, copies were commissioned, portions were read aloud during rituals, and local healers apprenticed with monks to learn medical recipes.
As the stories tell us, circulation depended on relationships. Monks maintained the texts, but lay patrons provided resources. Teachers passed excerpts to students. Traveling monks and merchants moved knowledge between regions. This human web is what made intellectual culture resilient. The elders taught us that the text was only one part. The ritual practice, the chanting, the embodied knowledge of healing and performance kept memory alive too.
Reading a manuscript looks different from our page-by-page habits.
A scribe's hand, the line breaks, even the order of leaves all cue how a text is used. In rituals, a parita might be chanted in a call and response pattern, with a monk reading aloud and the community responding. In healing, a practitioner would read a recipe, prepare an herbal poultice, and perform accompanying gestures or prayers. Manuscripts acted as memory anchors for practices that were primarily oral.
Consider a medical recipe. It might list ingredients in a shorthand, assume hands-on knowledge about local plants, and reference ritual words that shape the efficacy of the cure. The deeper story is that texts were part of a living practice, knowledge transmitted through apprenticeship, performance, and repeated use, not a sealed library of static information.
But manuscripts face threats. Physically, palm leaves are vulnerable to humidity, insects, mold, and handling wear. Historically, fires, neglect, and social disruption led to many losses. Ethically, some texts are sacred, and communities expect respectful stewardship and controlled access. And then there's the challenge of modern solutions. Digitization promises wider access, but raises questions about who controls digital copies and how sacred contexts are preserved in an online format.
Let me share a few careful, contextualized examples, not reciting protected chants, but describing the kinds of texts and how they functioned. One manuscript we know about contains a medicinal recipe for treating fever. It lists a precise combination of crushed root, juice, and application ritual, and notes a seasonal timing. Another is a protective chant. The manuscript contains the incised lines as a prompt for a reciter. In practice, it is performed in a melodic, rhythmic way with community participation. A third is a short vernacular verse used in village storytelling. It connected moral teaching to everyday life and was often memorized and recited at festivals.
These stories matter because they show how manuscripts are woven into personal and communal life. They are culinary books, medical guides, prayer books, and pedagogical tools. That's where culture lives, in how knowledge is used and shared. The pattern shows us that protecting the object alone is not enough. We must support the people and practices that give those objects meaning.
If you want to support this work, start small and respectfully. Follow community-led digitization projects, share trustworthy resources, and consider supporting local training programs or conservation efforts run by Cambodian institutions. For visual learners, Samnong's YouTube channel shows careful, contextualized footage of conservation techniques and interviews with custodians. When you share, center the voices of Khmer custodians and avoid extracting sacred content without consent.
We'd love to hear from you. Share photos or questions on social media using the show handle, or send resources you found valuable. If you visit Cambodia, seek community-guided experiences that prioritize respectful access and learning. The cultural significance is that preservation is ultimately about relationships between past and present, object and community.
To recap, palm leaf manuscripts are fragile carriers of diverse Khmer knowledge, religious, medical, literary, and practical. Their creation was a skilled craft. Their circulation depended on human networks, and their survival today relies on conservation methods that honor local authority. If we care about heritage, we must support both objects and the living traditions that animate them.
If this episode resonated, please follow Ancient Echoes on your favorite podcast app and share it with someone who might appreciate these conversations. Consider supporting community archives and look for projects that partner with Khmer custodians.
You can also connect with us and share your own questions or resources at our social channels and on Samnong's YouTube, where we post companion visuals and further reading lists. Let's unlock the echoes of history together.
That brings us to the end of this episode of Ancient Echoes. We hope these stories helped you see Cambodian manuscript culture in a deeper, more human way. For sources and further reading, check the episode notes. We've linked community projects, digitized collections, and recommended scholarship.
The echoes of the past live on in people's voices, memories, and everyday lives. Thank you for listening and for making space for these stories. Until next time, We'll be exploring another thread of Cambodia's living heritage in our next episode.
Until next time, thank you for listening to Ancient Echoes.
In the quiet of night, I whispered my plea, holding her close, hoping for her decree. I called upon spirits, asked them to guide, to take her heart and lead her by my side. So I drew her near, traced her brow so fair, on my sight this way. Sacred power, Swahili, mighty spirit awakened. By the master's right, let her heart be gently taken. Let her follow me now by vow and by sign. I hear these words, oh teacher, witness this plea. Oh, my sacred power, Swahili.